Alright guys, so we are looking at this texture packet that you would have received this week. If I'm just looking at the first page, it says elements of art, texture. Texture is the way an object feels. In two-dimensional art, the texture is the way an object looks as it might feel, so the way it's implied. Down here it says 3D texture is the way an object actually feels. 3D texture is used in sculpture. Over here it says 2D texture is the way something might feel. Lines, shapes, value, and form can help imply texture. So let's talk about these two things because it can get a little confusing. 3D texture is the way something actually feels. So if you have a sculpture that's hairy, if you have a sculpture that's bumpy, if you have a sculpture that's smooth, but it can also talk about 2D things that have a 3D texture. So if I have a painting that I add hair to, that has 3D texture. If I have a painting that's bumpy or rough or smooth, the actual paint, the way that feels, that's a 3D texture. Versus 2D texture is the way something looks like it feels. So if I have a painting or a drawing and I draw hair or I draw bumps or I draw like that shiny little reflection to show that it's smooth, that's 2D texture. That's implied. That means I've used lines or shapes or value to tell you something might feel that way. I can have 2D texture on a sculpture. If I have a sculpture like a ceramic piece and I draw hair on it, that's 2D texture. It doesn't actually have a feeling, it's just implied, it's drawn on there. So that's the difference between 3D texture and 2D texture. It doesn't matter what surface it's on, what matters is how it feels. So if I can actually feel it, it's 3D texture. If I'm just drawing it or painting it, it's 2D texture. So the texture we're going to be working with this week is all 2D texture. Our drawings aren't going to have anything glued to it or have any big paint blobs or anything like that right now. We're just working in 2D texture. So if we're looking at 2D texture, rough texture can be implied through jagged and uneven lines, pointy shapes and forms, and uneven shading. So these are examples of rough texture. Smooth texture can be implied through curved lines, rounded shapes, and even shading. So this is that soft blending that we're going to look at in our value packet. Down here, it says certain finishes can also affect the texture of a work of art. Matte is not shiny, but has a quality that reflects a dull, soft light. So think of like matte photos, or like the tables in the art room are matte. They're not shiny. They've got kind of that non-reflective surface. Semi-gloss is the surface quality that has a light, shiny, reflective surface. So that would be like the paint on the bricks at school. The bricks have a semi-gloss texture to them. They're a little bit shiny, but not super shiny. And then gloss is a very shiny, highly reflective surface. So that would be like the screen of your iPad, the screen of your cell phone, windows, most cars, something that's really shiny and reflective. All right, if we're going to the second page, I'm just going to read through it. It says elements of art, texture, complete the worksheet, reference the front if you need help. This first step here says fill in the title using a range of textures. So fill in this texture spot using a whole bunch of different textures. The second spot here says draw lines and shapes that represent rough texture. That's what we saw on the front of the packet. This third spot here says draw lines and shapes that show smooth texture. That's what we saw in the front of the packet as well. This fourth box here says draw items in nature and daily life that are smooth. And I gave you some ideas. And then this last spot here says draw items in nature and daily life that are rough. So I think you guys have got that. I'll maybe show you a couple of textures that you could use in some of these spaces in your homework pack or in Google Classroom. Good luck, and let me know if you have questions.